Hello and welcome to Tenant Action Today, brought to you by Met Council on Housing, the citywide tenants union. If you believe in tenants' rights, if you want to help preserve the affordable housing we have and expand the supply of affordable housing, you have tuned to the right channel. Among other things, you will be able to call in and ask a question about a problem you're having with your landlord or about your rights as a tenant and get an answer from a tenant attorney right here on the air. You will also get some of the latest news of interest to tenant advocates. Finally, you will learn how you can help the campaign to restore our rent protection laws, which are due to expire in a little over 10 months and are in danger of being phased out. My name is Michael McKee. I'm a board member of Met Council on Housing and the treasurer of the Tenants Political Action Committee. Throughout the next hour, we're going to give you information about sources of advice and information for tenants. Sometimes this will be on the bottom third of the screen, sometimes on the full screen. You might want to get a pen and paper so you can write them down as we go along. Our guest for this program is David Hershey-Webb of the tenant law firm Himmelstein, McConnell, Gribben, Donahue, and Joseph. Welcome, David.
Good evening, Mike. Good to be here.
This is your first time on the new format.
Yes.
Yes. You had a very interesting case, was it last week?
Yes.
Involving, I refuse to call it Savoy Park. That's what the new landlords call it. To me, it will always be Delano Village, one of the large rent-stabilized complexes in Harlem. What happened there?
That's right. We're representing one of the buildings that's part of Delano Village. One of the buildings, 2300 Fifth Avenue, part of the complex that was renamed Savoy Park as part of their gentrification strategy. We have filed a lawsuit on behalf of about 47 of the tenants at 2300 Fifth Avenue for rent overcharges in the amount with treble damages of approximately $700,000. What happened there was that the tenants filed an application for a rent reduction based upon a decrease of building-wide services. There were a number of services that weren't being provided. There was, I believe, a broken security gate and a number of other issues several years ago. And the DHCR issued an order rolling back and freezing the tenants' rents, which is what they do in that instance. And the owner, rather than following the order of the DHCR, ignored the DHCR order and has been collecting rent increase ever since.
So when DHCR finds that a landlord has reduced services or not maintained required services, they basically freeze the rent so the landlord cannot get rent increases, and they roll the rent back by the last guidelines adjustment.
Exactly.
Very weak remedy, but that's what the law provides.
Exactly.
And in this case, the landlord ignored that and kept charging rent increases when the tenants renewed their leases.
Exactly. Initially, the Savoy Park, Vantage was the prior owner, which is somewhat well known. I believe the then Attorney General Cuomo, if I'm correct, went after Vantage for a number of improprieties and harassments of tenants. So originally it was Vantage, and now the new owner continued to collect the overcharges. And
so you filed this lawsuit,
yes.
and the total amount for the 47 households is $700,000.
$700,000, including treble damages, because you do get 3 times the damages. And we haven't gotten a response yet. It was filed just last week. We just served them, probably finalized the service at the end of last week. So we'll see what they come up with. I know there's been one or two news reports about it, and I understand they're telling the press they didn't know there was a rent reduction order, which is
we're the new
absurd.
landlord. We didn't know about this.
No, well, of course, when you buy a building, you know there's a rent reduction
Right.
order. And my clients certainly went to management numerous occasions and said, why are you collecting these increases? And in fact, the management has dragged a number of people into housing court on non-payments on these
when they've refused to
bogus
pay.
rents. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then your firm had a great victory 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, at London Terrace concerning access to the swimming pool.
Yeah, another decrease in services
this
case.
is a long struggle.
It's been going on for years. My partner, Billy Gribben, very much involved in it initially many years ago. London Terrace is a complex of a number, I believe it's 10 buildings, if I'm correct, 10 buildings in Chelsea where the tenants did enjoy a swimming pool and a sun deck. And a number of years ago, the landlord tried to take it away, and the owners, the tenants filed a decrease in services, and there was a settlement at that time that my partner was involved in, and they kept the pool until
the sun deck, yeah.
and the sun deck,
right.
Until just recently, when the owner tried to take it away again, and the tenants again filed an application for a rent reduction. I should say, actually what happened was the owner filed what's called a modification of services. So the owner asked the permission from DHCR to take it away.
Take the swimming pool away.
And the agency granted them the right to take it away on the condition that they reduced the rents by $165 a month, which is a comparable gym membership at a local gym that provides similar services.
Yeah.
So $165 a month is not a total victory for the tenants, because the tenants want the pool, but it's a decent rent reduction.
How has management responded?
I think they're probably going to come back to the negotiating table and see if they can.
Because the actual agreement, I believe, doesn't expire until the end of August.
Right.
Right. This is the agreement that was hammered out some years ago when they tried to take it away at that time.
Right. So I don't know the exact status of the negotiations, but I think it was a good victory for the tenants. Not everything, but it was a good decision by the DHCR.
And it's kind of surprising that DHCR would be, in a sense, proactive here, because they tend to be kind of cautious. In a lot of cases, shall we say? I don't want to get you in trouble here or get you out on a limb, but my view of the agency is that they tend to be very cautious.
They are cautious. I am probably one of the few tenants attorneys I deal with DHCR a lot that will say that they do issue good decisions now and then. But they are cautious, and they have a very bad habit when they do issue a good decision and the landlord appeals it, of bringing it back and changing it. So I'd like for them to stop doing that.
We've seen that happen a few times,
yes,
haven't we?
They do that.
Yes.
So that's not good.
Yeah. But this is great. I mean, the Tenants Association at London Terrace has, they have really fought hard, and they have organized well. And in addition to having good lawyers, they've got a strong tenants association, which makes all the difference in this kind of fight.
It's so important. Both at Delano Village and at London Terrace, you have good tenants associations, good leadership at Delano Village, particularly at 2300 and in the complex. But you're absolutely right, at London Terrace, a tenants association that goes back many, many years, and we've represented for many years and been able to win a number of victories.
Okay, we'll be back to this subject in a little bit. Before we take calls, a few things that you should know about Met Council on Housing. First, Met Council runs a tenant hotline every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1:30 to 5 p.m. Tenants can call 212-979-0611 during those hours and get advice from a live counselor. Also, Met Council on Housing has a weekly radio program, Housing Notebook, on WBAI FM 99.5 on the FM dial. Housing Notebook is on the air every Monday from 8 to 9 p.m. You can also listen on the internet at www.wbai.org. Finally, Met Council on Housing publishes the only tenant newspaper in New York City, called Tenant Inquilino. Those who become members of Met Council receive the newspaper in the mail every month. An important point: Metropolitan Council on Housing is not and has never been affiliated with the Metropolitan Council on Jewish Poverty. They are completely separate organizations. Now, here are some brief news items and announcements of interest to tenants. First, Governor Andrew Cuomo's attempt to remove Zephyr Teachout from the September 9th Democratic primary ballot has failed. In a strongly worded decision on Monday, Justice Edgar Walker of State Supreme Court in Brooklyn rejected Cuomo's claim that Professor Teachout had not lived in New York State for 5 years, as required by the state constitution. The election law attorney hired by the Cuomo campaign, former state senator Martin Connor, announced that he will appeal the judge's decision. The New York Times ran an editorial calling on Cuomo to stop what it called his, quote, political bullying, end quote, and to debate Ms. Teachout. The Fordham law professor has criticized Cuomo for his fiscal policies that favor the rich at the expense of the middle class and poor New Yorkers, and for his manipulation of the Moreland Act Commission he appointed to investigate public corruption and then disbanded prematurely. She has started a petition to the governor demanding a debate. Don't hold your breath. Next, in January of last year, Governor Cuomo and the state legislature awarded 5 luxury developers benefits under the 421A tax abatement subsidy program, despite the fact that they were not eligible. But only 2 of the developers who received this legislative carve-out have applied for and received the tax breaks, according to The Real Deal, a real estate magazine. The 5 developers received subpoenas from the Moreland Commission about this legislative carve-out, but escaped scrutiny when Governor Cuomo shut the Anti-Corruption Commission down prematurely. This carve-out seems to be a perfect illustration of Albany's pay-to-play culture, as they had all made significant contributions to Cuomo and other state politicians. Next, the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development continues its mean-spirited campaign to force Section 8 tenants to downsize, to move to smaller apartments, or lose their Section 8 subsidy. In a real shocker, HPD sent a letter to a tenant at Land's End, a former Mitchell-Lama building in Lower Manhattan, a tenant who suffers from stage 4 lung cancer, telling him that he must downsize from the 2-bedroom apartment he shares with his sister to a 1-bedroom. 38 other tenants in the building also received such letters. HPD claims it's required to reduce outlays for Section 8 because of federal budget cuts. Tenants across the city are up in arms about this move. Finally, the poor door phenomenon seems to be spreading. A developer in West Hollywood, California, has asked the city for permission to build an apartment building with 64 market rate and 17 affordable units. The builder's application states that tenants of the 17 affordable apartments will not have access to the swimming pool and would be required to use a separate entrance. West Hollywood was founded as a city 30 years ago, this year, based on 2 issues, gay rights and rent control. The city has enacted many tenant protection laws and does not allow new development unless it includes affordable housing. Needless to say, the developer's proposal has created a major controversy. So, the poor door phenomenon goes on and on and on.
It's really something. I'm waiting for the cartoon. I'm sure somebody's done it, and I don't mean it at all to say it's absolutely comparable, because it's not. But I'm waiting for the water fountain regulated and market, and there is sometimes a racial component to some of this as well, because obviously there are more regulated tenants of color and poorer also. So.
Yeah, and even if there's not a racial component, it's economic segregation. I mean, for years, I have many criticisms of the 80-20 federal program, but the good thing about the 80-20 program was that people lived next door to each other, and you couldn't tell which apartments were which. You couldn't tell which apartments were the market rate apartments and which were the, quote, affordable or below market apartments. And now we've had this perversion of this, starting with the Bloomberg administration, allowing developers to create separate entrances, or in some cases, like at the Silverstein Towers in the West 40s, they actually were able to put the affordable units in a separate building. So you've got the 2 market rate towers on 42nd Street, and then on 41st Street, on the back end of the complex, facing a bus garage, you've got the building with the 88 affordable apartments, a totally separate building, of course, not anywhere near as nice as the 2 market rate towers on 42nd Street.
Well, we have a lot of kids in the city that benefit from a free lunch program in the schools. Wouldn't it be the same as setting up separate tables for the kids that benefit from the free lunch program, the kids that pay for their lunch? Wouldn't that be a similar?
That's a pretty good analogy. That's as good as the water fountains.
I mean, no, it's a sign of the times.
I'm afraid so. But I mean, while it's going to take a while to amend the zoning code that allows this to happen, and the de Blasio administration says it's going to take about a year to amend the zoning code. They say they are going to amend the zoning code that they will no longer allow separate but unequal facilities. And there's also legislation in Albany and in the city council to prohibit landlords from denying services to the rent-regulated tenants that they provide to the market rate tenants. We've had a number of buildings, mainly on the west side of Manhattan, where in one case the landlord put in a new gym, and only the market rate tenants are allowed to use the gym. And
yeah, I tell you, it also troubles me because I've been advocating for 20, 30 years, a very long time. I think the division between regulated tenants and market tenants is an unfair divide in some ways. I tell you, I get more and more in my office, and I got this years ago too, but more and more I get in my office. I have market tenants call me up all the time and say, I've lived somewhere for 5, 6 years, I've raised a family here, and the landlord just told me he's not renewing my lease. Can he do that?
Right.
They
People are shocked.
Or he'll renew my lease, but he wants to charge another $1,000 a month. Can he really do that? And
People
I
are amazed.
strongly believe there's at least a segment, maybe not majority, there's a segment of the market tenants who could ally with the regulated tenants and expand rent regulation. I think they're out there.
Yeah, the Real Rent Reform Campaign, which is organizing the fight over strengthening the rent laws in Albany next year, because it's just a little bit over 10 months when the rent laws expire in the state legislature. And they will be renewed. The only question is in what form. But we are making a pitch to market rate tenants to get involved because, number one, we want to re-regulate the apartments that have been lost to vacancy deregulation.
Right.
Put those back under rent stabilization, ideally with a rent rollback. So people would have basic rights. They would have a right to renew their lease. They would have limits on how much the rent could go up in the future. All of the things that market rate tenants don't have. I don't believe that all market rate tenants are resentful of or feel that they are subsidizing the rent-regulated tenants in the building.
No.
But there are some who obviously do feel that way. And you probably will never change their minds. But
no, but
there are many who, and then when the landlord says, I'm not renewing your lease,
those are recruits.
Comes home.
Those are the recruits.
Yeah.
They're incredulous.
Yes.
And they're incredulous because people have an innate sense of justice. And when the law is out of line with that innate sense of justice, they sit up and go, "Ooh, I don't understand." It's the same with MCIs, which allows a landlord to get a rent increase when he does a major capital improvement in a building. Every tenant who comes into my office on an MCI, the first thing they say, can he get a rent increase if he allowed the building to deteriorate, if he didn't keep up the maintenance? Well, he can, yes, he can, but that offends people's innate sense of justice.
As it should.
As it should.
Yeah.
And that's a place where the law is really out of line with what I would say is the right thing.
Yeah, and it is very upsetting to tenants when they've been fighting for years to get repairs, and the landlord's been allowing things to go downhill, and then all of a sudden he comes in and puts in a new system or, upgrades the wiring or something like that, and he gets a rent increase for it.
It makes people apoplectic.
Yeah.
I always tell people the story of a building where the pipes were deteriorated, terribly deteriorated, to the point where they sued the landlord in housing court. The court ordered the landlord to replace the pipes. He replaced the pipes, and then he got a rent increase.
For doing it, for following the court order.
Exactly.
That's justice.
That's right.
Yeah, and of course, we should also remember it's not just a rent increase. It's a permanent rent increase that is compounded with the base rent. So once the landlord has collected 100% of the cost of the improvement, the rent increase does not go away. It stays on your rent. Furthermore, when you get a regular rent increase, either because you renew your lease under rent stabilization, or under rent control, you get another 7.5% MBR increase. That's compounded.
Right, right.
So these rent increases build on themselves.
The other thing about the MCIs, the point that I keep making in my papers to the DHCR, but they haven't picked up on it really, is that in buildings where there are dwindling numbers of rent stabilized tenants, the whole rationale of the MCI program no longer makes any sense, because the purpose of the program was to incentivize landlords in buildings where there was depressed revenue because of rent regulation, incentivize the landlords to do these capital improvements. But in a building where there's only 20–30% regulated tenants left and the rest are market, the landlord does not need an incentive of any kind to do those kinds of improvements.
You don't have to have permission of the agency to raise the rent for the market rate tenants to pay for the improvement.
No.
You only need that for the rent regulated tenants.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's not the kind of argument that I would expect the state housing agency to
didn't buy it.
I'm not surprised they don't buy it.
Well,
or at least not yet.
I'll try another one.
You'll try another one. You know, last week we had a very interesting conversation about the whole subject of buyouts.
Yes.
Which seem to be on the rise. There seem to be more and more landlords trying to buy tenants out, often combined with other strategies like harassment and, you know, disruptive construction in the building to, you know, encourage people to get out. But there are a lot of pitfalls for tenants in the area of buyouts, and I wonder if you have any. How do you advise people? I mean, of course, and then the threshold question is, we don't want to encourage buyouts because we're losing the affordable housing if the landlord buys the tenant out. It's
exactly.
There's
an underlying problem with buyouts at all, that we don't want to lose affordable housing. But I'll tell you, what the landlords are doing, and there's kind of a mania right now on buyouts to some extent. It's a carrot and stick approach, but the carrot is very small and the stick is very large, certainly initially. And we talked about this a little. What the landlords typically do, they might serve you with a frivolous notice of eviction of some kind, or even I've had landlords simply call up the tenant and say, you got to move in a few months for no reason. Yeah, I'm sorry, you have to move. You have to move.
And people don't understand that they don't have to move.
Right. Some people don't really. Some people, if a landlord says, I need to take back the apartment. I have a client where the landlord said, I'm doing renovations. It's often around renovations. I'm doing renovations in the building. You have to move. But I'll give you a couple $1,000s to move. Now, for people down on their luck or scraping to get by, a couple $1,000s might come in handy at that moment. But obviously, selling out a rent-stabilized apartment for that amount of money when there's no place to go,
and it's certainly not going to pay for replacement housing.
It's not going to pay
very
for
long.
anything.
Maybe a week.
No. So, as in so many things, if a landlord is pressuring you in any way, the best thing to do, if you can possibly do it, is to retain an attorney, or at least consult an attorney about what your rights are, and never sign anything without consulting an attorney. That's probably the best advice I could give anyone ever. Never sign anything.
I've seen this a lot lately. I've seen 2 or 3 cases in the last several months of where the landlord sends everyone in the building a notice. You know, you have to vacate in 30 days, including people who have current leases.
Right.
Because if you have a lease, whether you're rent stabilized or not, you cannot be evicted mid-lease, until the lease runs out. But I've seen this happen where even people with leases think, well, the landlord says I have to get out, so I guess I have to get out. And where they combine this with minimal buyout offers and a lot of disruptive construction, gut renovation with people still in the building, dust, noise, security problems because you have workers going in and out, and so the door to the building stays open all day long. They remove the locks from the doors leading to the roof so that someone could come in to your building, from the rooftop, which is very dangerous. a real bad security concern, and people feel unsafe.
It's a strategy being used all over town. They used to, in the 80s, they brought in the dogs, but today they bring in the renovations. That's the, that is definitely a strategy. And I will tell you, in my opinion, that the city agencies whose jurisdiction is to make sure tenants are safe, their property and their health is safe during renovations, do not do a very good job on that, and that's part of the problem.
That's true. I mean, it's hard to get a stop work order when something like this is happening, and of course, you hope that tenants who are in this situation will go somewhere or call someone who would know something about what to tell them what to do. Because you know, people don't know what to do. You know, all of a sudden you're in this situation, and where do we go? Who do we complain to? What do we do? And the lucky ones are those who go to a local community group, or go to a lawyer, or go to legal aid or legal services, or go to sometimes their elected official's office, and learn that they have rights, that they don't have to just get out, that the landlord doesn't have the automatic, you know, God-given right to do renovations at midnight. To do renovations, you have to have a building permit. And if you're not doing something within the parameters of what's allowed by the building permit or by the law, the Department of Buildings is supposed to issue a stop work order. And my experience is it's very hard to get that to happen, but you can in really egregious cases.
Yeah, and it helps in that it helps to have the electeds involved when it comes to when it comes to the Department of Buildings, pressure from elected officials and community boards. Also, there's some community boards that are very good because they have a relationship with the Department of Buildings. I'm thinking when of course I started out in politics in the 80s with a assemblyman on the Upper West Side, where they had a very good community board. I think the board managers is still there after 20, 30 years. But the community board has a relationship with the Department of Buildings. So you use the community board as well as your elected officials to pressure the city agencies to do what they're supposed to be doing.
They will respond. The city agencies do tend to respond faster if it's an elected official's office calling or a community board. That's a good point. And some of the community boards really do have they really have a, you know, a whole encyclopedia of knowledge about all this stuff and know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's just so frustrating to see people take $2,000 or $3,000 and move, or just leave because the landlord sent them a notice.
I tell rent-stabilized tenants who come into my office who are fearful, there's a psychological aspect to this. I tell them you are
guerrilla warfare.
You are in the driver's seat. No, but the landlord wants something that you have. But you're in. Think of it as you being in the driver's seat. Don't think of it as it's his apartment to give back to him. No, it's your apartment. So there's a psychological component because people are fearful, of course.
Yeah, that's important because it is guerrilla warfare. It's a war of nerves.
It's very much a war of nerves. I've had landlords tell my clients that you have to move out of your apartment because it's dangerous in the building. What I explained to people, you never have to move out of your apartment unless the city of New York issues a vacate order. This is a legal order to require you to move out of your apartment. The landlords can't simply come
because the conditions are dangerous. In which
case,
get to that point, the buildings department will issue a vacate order.
If it gets to that point, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, people don't know this. It's just astonishing how little people know about how little most tenants know about their rights, and it's kind of frustrating to watch. And it's definitely on the uprise.
Yeah. Well, we're gentrifying at a rapid.
We're rapidly gentrifying.
I don't know if it goes
city.
Super gentrifying. There's probably another word for it. I don't know.
But it's really frustrating, and I know you must deal with this every day in terms of people being afraid and afraid even to stand up for their rights.
People are afraid. People are ill-informed. And sometimes I tell people some of the most dangerous landlords are the friendly ones, who try to, I'm going to help you out. I'm not here to hurt you. But I'm doing some renovations, and
I didn't know this happened. I mean, if you had called me, I would have made sure this didn't happen.
Be careful of the friendly landlords.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I had an experience in my neighborhood recently where buildings across the street from where I live, there's like, I don't know, 6 tenants left out of a 22-unit, 2-building complex, and the workers came in and removed the fire stops.
Oh, yeah,
from
geez.
all. Yeah. I mean, and we were able to get a stop work order with the help of some of the local officials until they put the fire stops back in. And you know, I have a firefighter friend who said, go to the local firehouse.
Yeah.
If you have that kind of situation, get the fire department on their case
Yes.
too, not just the buildings department, because that kills firefighters when you don't have fire stops, you know, to stop the fire from spreading. And so they did put the fire stops back in, and the stop work order was lifted, and now the tenants are still dealing with the same lack of security, the same, you know, problems with dust and noise and all of that. And they've all been sent notices terminating their tenancies.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really...
I have a great friendly landlord story, and the tenant, I think, had known the landlord or the agent for years, and her rent had gotten high enough that she was subject to luxury deregulation. Of course, she was way below income, but still, if your rent gets to a certain level,
high income deregulation.
High income deregulation.
Not luxury deregulation.
We don't use the term luxury.
That's what the landlords call it.
High income deregulation. So her rent at that time, I guess, had hit $2,000, and she was subject to high income.
And that was the threshold at that time.
At that time,
right.
a regulation, and the agent sent her the forms to fill out and send back. And she talked to the landlord one day, and the landlord said, "You don't have to send them back; give them to me." and she got an order of deregulation, which we appealed and won.
Oh, you don't have to send it back. Sure, you don't send it back, and I'm going to get an order to evict you.
Exactly. So be careful. Don't take legal advice from your landlord.
Or don't bother coming to court. You don't need to come to court. It was a mistake.
I'm sure.
Yes.
People have told tenants
we're suing
that.
you for non-payment of rent, but it was a mistake.
Exactly.
Someone in the office made a mistake. You don't need to come to court next week. Yeah. Yes, right.
Don't ever take advice from your landlord.
You have a default judgment against you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you advise tenants on the subject of buyouts? What do you tell them to watch out for, what not to do, what to do?
Well, as I said, the first thing is you should certainly consult someone if any kind of offer is made. In general, speaking to landlords, and certainly when it comes to a buyout, I don't give landlords information. Hear what they have to say, but don't make any kind of response. And certainly, before you've had a chance to sit down and talk to someone, if the landlord says, "I want to give you money to give up your apartment," say, well, "Tell me, if you have something, tell me. You tell me." But when the landlord says, "Well, what do you think? What would you like?
What would you think would be a fair amount?"
Don't answer. Don't answer. Certainly not before consulting with a professional who knows something about this area. So don't engage. Don't engage with the
People
landlord.
think they're obligated to talk to the landlord, and they're not.
That's true. I mean, the other thing is, I mean, you have to sit down and talk to someone in the business, an attorney, and know something about these. But there are tax consequences to buyouts that you have to.
It's taxable income.
You have to understand.
You have to pay income tax on
it. So a number that might look like something that would make some sense to you, once you factor in the taxes, won't make any sense to you. You consider also what the market is for rentals, because there are a lot of regulated tenants who, because they've had this protection, which is a wonderful, excellent protection that we cherish in New York, and we're trying to expand. But because they've had this protection, there are regulated tenants who do not fully understand what market rents are and what their options are. So before you ever consider selling your regulated apartment, do some research into what kind of apartments are available at market rents. And it may discourage you from ever considering the possibility.
And if you plan to stay in New York, how much would you be paying for replacement housing? It's certainly going to be more.
Exactly. Most likely, particularly if
people don't think about that.
If you're in Manhattan, you're going to be moving to Brooklyn or Queens or Staten Island.
You wouldn't be able to afford to do much else.
Or Wyoming.
I always tell tenants in this situation, do not try to handle this negotiation yourself. Hire an attorney. Yeah. People make mistakes. First of all, if you give any indication to the landlord that you're eager for a buyout,
That's the other thing.
I mean, your leverage goes down. You have no leverage.
Right.
I mean, if the landlord knows you want to leave, then why should he give you any money to do that?
That's a very good point, and that's actually the first thing I tell people when they come into my office. Never be the first person. Never be the one to first raise.
Call up the landlord. Would you be willing to buy me out? No, not a good idea.
I had a client that did something like that, and was offered. It was actually, I think, $5,000 for his apartment. He'd been at 40, 50 years. Not only had he first raised it, but he insisted that I continue to call the landlord back week after week and say, is that still the number? Is that, to push him on it. And so at the end of the day, after a year or so of continuing to make calls, I advised my client, no, I really shouldn't be calling him. Wait, let him call you. He insisted, no, call him. After about 2 years of this, he took the $5,000 and gave up his 40-year, very nice rent regulated
Oh, Lord.
apartment.
I obviously did not stay in New York City.
No.
Okay, now we have a phone call. Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, I am in an affordable housing unit of senior citizens, and 2 years ago when I first came aboard, I was working, so my rent was calibrated to my
Your rent's based on your income. It's a percentage of your
right.
income.
Yeah, thanks. Right. That now, unfortunately, I've been out of work. I've been trying to get jobs. I get some jobs and not. And I'm wondering what avenues would I have. I've been told by a number of people that there's no way I can get my rent reduced.
Well, in general, if your income, first of all, you have to recertify once a year.
Yes, I certified again this year.
Yeah. Well,
and I also did last year. I also did SCREE, so it locked in my rent for.
You applied for SCREE?
Yes, I did.
And did you get it?
Yes, I did, but it locked in the rent. It locked in the rent.
Yes.
The amount that I was paying when I first got in. So
yeah, at the legal rent. Yeah, I mean, without getting into the details, and we'll do this in a second about what a particular program is. In general, these programs allow you to certify. You don't have to wait for a year to go by to do the regular certification. In fact, if your income goes up, it's usually a good idea to recertify early. If your income goes down, same thing.
Okay.
And of course, people whose income goes up, let's say you just certified two months ago, and then you wait another 10 months to recertify, you're going to owe a lot of back rent at that point, which is why it makes sense to do it before and not wait for the regular certification period. For
that's if the rent goes up. What if
regular certification cycle.
Goes down as well?
Do you know what kind of
the
program your building is in?
I'm sorry, that again.
Do you know what kind of is this Section 8 or what, or do you know?
No, it's not Section 8. It was called it's not a Section 8 building. It's called what's it called? MIA, medium average income, or MAI. I'm not sure. No.
Medium area income.
I'm sorry.
Medium area income.
That's it. MAI, medium area.
Well, that's not a program. That's a method of calculating.
Okay.
I mean, do you know what the building was built under, or if it was renovated, what kind of program it you know what the status is?
I'm not clear on that. It's a new building. It's about 6 or 7 years old. And my sense of it is that it's the owners have gotten some kind of city subsidy or rebate or subvention, and I'm not really clear, so I'm just going to mumble stuff that I'm not really clear
you should try to find out.
Okay, so I should find out the status of the building.
But I think in the meantime, ask the managing agent or ask the office, say that you need to recertify because your income has gone down.
Yes, well, they sent me recertification papers that I believe are due in October, and to recertify for October, because that's when I came in.
What else? How else would you advise the caller, David?
I'm sorry?
I think that's the right thing, to recertify as soon as he can, if it's an income-based program.
I wouldn't wait until October. Yeah. I would go there. I would say, look, I need to recertify. My income has gone down.
And what are the possible outcome of that? Is it a lowering of rent or?
It would lower the amount that you pay, because typically tenants in your situation pay 30% of their income
Right.
for rent. So if your income has gone down, then your share of the rent will be less, and the part that the government pays for will increase.
I see.
That's the design of the program.
This month's rent was down like by $200. I was surprised. They said some credit, and I didn't understand that. So, I sent that amount, but
I think we might be able to give you a better answer if we knew more about the status of the building or what kind of program this is.
Okay, gotcha. So I should find that out, and who should I call back for the?
But in general, if it is income-based, as a rule, you don't have to wait for the regular certification cycle to recertify. You in general, you can do that early.
Okay, they did send me the papers, so to recertify,
You've already got the papers?
Yeah, I already have the papers. I haven't done it as yet because I wanted to suss out what the
Well,
deal
then
was.
don't delay, because yes, your rent will go down.
Oh, great, good. That's good.
I mean, that's the whole design of the program.
I didn't realize that because I asked people. I've asked some people.
If you pay 30% of your income for rent and your income goes down, then your share of the rent will go down.
Gotcha. Okay, so I should find out the status of the building. I believe you hit it on the head. It's income based.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be helpful if we knew what program the building was built under.
Okay,
and there are various programs.
I see. And when I find out, and I who should I call to
you
suss
can
out?
give a call back here, or you can call Met Council on Housing.
Gotcha.
The hotline is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1:30 to 5.
Good-o.
You can call and talk to a live counselor.
Good-o. Yes, I did copy the number down from today's program, yeah.
Well, it's on the screen right now, so that's what I would do, but I would go ahead and certify.
Okay,
your rent will go down. It should.
Okay, good-o. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for calling. Good luck.
Thank you. Good day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, there are so many different programs like this. Okay, we're going to make an announcement now and put the information on the screen. Next Wednesday, August 20th, there's going to be a rally and a march for real affordability. And this is going to be big. And we are urging everyone who's watching to attend. It's next Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. We're meeting at First Corinthian Baptist Church. That's at Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard, which is 7th Avenue and West 116th Street. There will be a rally at the church, and then there will be a march afterwards. And this is it's a multi-pronged platform, including making sure that the housing that the de Blasio administration is planning to build or preserve is truly affordable for people who really need it, and not what some people call affordable. And to make sure that our rent laws are not just simply renewed, but strengthened when they come up for renewal in the state legislature next June. And if you want to get involved in that fight to strengthen our rent laws, and specifically to repeal vacancy deregulation, you need to get in touch with Met Council and ask, how can I help? Because we have plenty of work for you to do. So, David, buyouts, back to buyouts. What are other than the pitfalls we've talked about, including the fact that people don't realize that they're going to have to pay income tax on this, which usually the landlord doesn't bother telling you that.
No.
So if you get $100,000, depending on your tax bracket, you might have to pay what, $30,000, $40,000 to the government for income tax, because it is regular income. And I believe there's a dispute over whether it should be treated as regular income or capital gains. Is there any clarity of that?
I'm not a tax attorney. My understanding is it's capital gains, but it's still a big hit.
Still a big hit.
Still a big hit.
Not as big as regular income, but
I hear 27%, but it's completely off the record, and you have to consult a tax attorney. Don't take what I say as
right.
being,
So you in addition to needing an attorney to negotiate, you're going to need an accountant or a CPA or a tax attorney to
Yeah,
deal with the
yeah.
tax implications.
And if you're on any kind of government program, a disability or other programs where you get any money at all from the government, it can affect that as well.
Sure.
So you have to look into that as well.
It could affect your senior citizen rent increase exemption subsidy. It could affect your disability rent increase exemption. Yeah, it's true. People don't really think about that.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of pitfalls.
A lot of pitfalls. All right, now we have another call. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, you're on the air.
Thank you. I would like to know how you find out what the real legal rent for your apartment is. When you think that the rent that you're paying is really too high.
That's a very good question. That's an extremely good question. In fact, I had 2 calls like that this week. David, how would you answer the caller?
Well, the first thing that you need to do is get from the DHCR, the Division of Housing Community Renewal, which is the state agency that supervises rent regulation, get a copy of your rent history for that apartment, which will tell you what the tenants were paying before you moved into the apartment. Because when the apartment turns over from one tenant to another tenant, there's a limit on the amount that the landlord can charge. It's set by the law. There's a vacancy increase that he can get. There's certain increases that he can get for improvements to the apartment. So that's the first thing that you need to do.
And you can get that at the various district rent offices?
You can get it at the district rent office. I understand if you Google DHCR, go to their website. You can also call them and they'll send it to you, although it may be better to go into the rent office. I understand that the DHCR has a new policy that they'll only give you the last 4 years, but I think if you push them on it,
really outrageous.
Tell them that you want the entire history, you can get that. So don't be satisfied with 4 years. Get the complete rental history. And then it's a matter of, and again, you probably want to sit down with an attorney or someone at a rent clinic, at a tenant clinic, to understand what the laws are in terms of what kinds of increases the landlord can get, to determine whether, if there was a turnover in the apartment a few years ago, did he do the kind of renovations he needed to increase the rents? So that's one thing you want to look at. Of course.
Well, the actual issue is that in 1999,
okay,
in this apartment, my mother died, and the rent was about $900 or $1,000 rent. And at the time that I got the succession right, then the apartment suddenly became expensive, and now it's $2,400 a month.
When you got succession rights in 99?
99.
And are you saying that the rent jumped from the time your mother had the apartment to...
and it's rent controlled, yes.
It's rent control, but it jumped immediately from 900 to what?
Well, it started going up really fast.
Yeah, there are a couple. Again, you have to trace out the history. If you're rent controlled, the rents do go up. Unfortunately, they are going up very fast for rent control because.
But under DHR, could I find out what the rent history was from 99 until now?
Well, it's much easier to get a rent history for a rent stabilized apartment than it is for a rent controlled apartment, and that's because there's this anomaly in the law that requires landlords to register rent stabilized apartments every year, but not rent controlled apartments.
I see.
And do you get rent increases under the maximum base rent program?
Yes.
The 7.5%?
Right.
And you get a fuel pass along on top of that?
Yes, and also they did something with the elevator where they improved the elevator.
You mean an MCI?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, and it's what you're telling us is that in a short period of time when you exercised your right of succession because you were living with your mother and you got recognized as the tenant, your rent jumped from $900 to $2,400?
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, not
No,
right
it
away. Not right away. But
No, not right away, but
it just over the last 13 years,
Yeah.
it's gone from 900 to 2,400.
Oh, okay,
Well, that's,
not overnight.
that's not impossible that it
Yeah.
legally did that. But
how can I check to see that it's accurate?
You know what? There are, first of all, this is this is rent control,
Yeah.
which is much more arcane and much more complicated than rent stabilization, especially when it comes to calculating rents. My suggestion would be to find an elected official, and there are some, who has somebody on staff who knows rent control.
Okay.
Or to go to a community group. In fact, if you call Met Council, we will try to refer you somewhere.
Okay.
There are people who know a lot about rent control, but a lot of people who do this work, attorneys, organizers, know rent stabilization, and they find rent control kind of impenetrable.
there's about 5 people in no rent.
There's about
no,
5
there's
people.
a few more than that.
5 people in this
left.
entire state of New York.
I know them all.
But you need to count. It is possible that over the last 13 years, your rent could have gone from 900 to 2,400 with a combination of maximum base rent increases, which essentially it's a little more complicated than this, but generally it's 7.5% every year. Fuel pass-alongs on top of that, which is a separate dollar amount per room charge that rent-stabilized tenants don't pay. And you mentioned that you'd had rent increases for building-wide improvements like elevators. So it's possible you could, but to unravel this is going to take some serious calculation, and you need to find somebody who understands this stuff and can help you with it. I thought you were telling us that they jumped your rent from 900 to 2,400 when they gave you the right of succession.
I'm applying for SCREE now, and I want to freeze it at whatever the correct rent would be.
Well, SCREE just got the income eligibility threshold just got raised for both the senior citizen and the disability rent increase exemption programs. It's now $50,000 a year household income, which is a big increase over the old threshold. So if your household income is less than $50,000 and you are paying 1/3 of your income or more for rent, and you're 62 or older, you probably qualify for SCREE. And that'll freeze your rent, at least. It won't roll your rent back, but it'll at least freeze it.
I want to freeze it at the accurate rent, not whatever the wrong rent is.
No, it will not undo any legal rent increases that you've paid already. That's unfortunately not the way SCREE and DREE work.
Right.
It doesn't roll anything back. It just freezes you in place.
Right.
So the sooner you apply, the better, because every year under rent control, you will get another 7.5% rent increase. Okay. Now, we should also mention that the landlord doesn't lose anything, because instead of getting the rent increase, the landlord gets a credit on his real property tax bill. In other words, the city doesn't collect as much real property taxes as they would if the landlord were collecting the rent increase. So the city pays for this program, not the landlord.
But you definitely want to sit down with someone who knows rent control and review those rents as soon as possible, because if there is an error in the legal rent, that would certainly help you with your SCREE. So you want to do that soon.
Well, thank you very much for your help. I think
good luck.
Really
Thanks for
helped
calling.
A lot of people. Thank you.
Okay. And oh boy, I hate dealing with rent control because it's just it's hard to decipher. And it's hard to reconstruct.
They're getting hit so hard, and I understand there's a bit of an issue from an advocacy perspective, because there are some landlords that don't put in for the increases. So it's hard to figure out from an advocacy perspective what the best, you may have an idea. I don't know what the best way to address it is, but the rent control tenants that are getting the increases are just being killed.
I know, because rent control tenants tend to be elderly and much lower income than rent stabilized, well, not much lower, but lower income than stabilized tenants, certainly much lower than average New Yorkers. and they get much higher rent increases.
Nobody can pay
than
us
rent stabilized.
7.5%. That's ridiculous.
And then you get a fuel pass along on top of that. And in
impossible.
some buildings, you get a labor pass along. Every time there's a new contract for the buildings workers union, you get a hit there. So and none of this exists under rent stabilization. So it's really not fair. And the only way we're going to be able to stop this is to change the law. But apparently, according to DHCR, about 2/3 of the rent-controlled apartments are in the MBR program and are getting those rent increases.
2/3 are.
And about 1/3 are not. And some landlords just don't apply. Like if you've got one rent-controlled apartment left in your building, you might decide to hell with it. I'm not going to apply for the rent increase. I'll let the rent stay where it is. Some people haven't had rent increases under rent control for 30 years for that reason.
Right.
Or they get denied. They apply for it and they get denied because they haven't maintained the building, which
Right.
is
Those are the stories
Yeah.
the New York Post likes as being allegedly representative
or the New York
of
Times,
rent regulation,
like
which they're not.
the princess from Afghanistan.
They like those stories.
Yeah, right. So we are out of time, David. Thank you so much.
It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's
as
been
always.
it's been great. You've been watching Tenant Action Today. We are on every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. If you want to get involved in the fight to strengthen our rent laws, please get in touch with Met Council on Housing. Thanks for watching, and please tune in again next week.